Kenyans recognize what is called the mitumba industry, and this is that trading industry that deals with imported second-hand clothes and footwear. And I think this is an industry that's been in Kenya now for more than 30 years. At the start of when the government announced restrictions last year, in 2020, to help with the containment of the spread of the coronavirus, SARS coronavirus 2, among the industries that had import bans was mitumba. The argument at that time was that there's a possibility that the import of goods, second-hand goods, could spread. In addition to the fact that there's the restrictions on trading in market areas because of the proximity of traders to the people that they sell to. Besides that health question, has been an ongoing argument in Kenya about who exactly trades mitumba and what's the extent and the economics of this industry in Kenya. So we at the Institute of Economic Affairs decided to carry out a study, and among the questions we asked ourselves was the extent of mitumba trade in Kenya, trying to track the entry of goods, who buys and how much is spent on it. We had a couple of some findings that I'll share now. One of those is that by the year 2019, the total amount of the volume of mitumba products brought into Kenya was about 180,000 tons, which is close to about 8,000 containers over that year. The value of that was close to about 18 billion Kenya shillings, which comes down to about 18 billion Kenya shillings, and the total tax payment for those imports was about 18 billion shillings, coming close to about 1.5 billion per month. Through estimation by mixing data sets from the National Bureau of Statistics and speaking to traders in mitumba, our estimate is that 200,000 people trade mitumba directly, and that another close to another 600 to almost 1 million shillings trade, 600,000 to 1 million shillings trade mitumba, either directly or indirectly, or serving that industry by providing services that are related to that industry. So for instance, transportation, some design, so people who transport from one port to the other, and the others are providing services of storage and transportation between markets, and people who provide security services in terms of guarding warehouses and warehouse provision. So if you look at the entire chain of imports from the port of Mombasa, where the goods are landed, all the way down to Nairobi and into other parts of the country, going all the way to the borders and to all other smaller cities and smaller towns, it comes close to between 1.8 million to about 2 million people who had their income both directly and indirectly from mitumba trading. Looking at what Kenyans spend, how Kenyans consume, in that same year, 2019, 2.5% of all total spending in Kenya, basically 2%, the equivalent, the amount of money that Kenyans used on buying mitumba goods and new clothes was 2.5% of the gross domestic product, coming down to about 192 billion shillings in that year. So Kenya spends something close to 15 billion shillings per month in the purchase of goods, both new and used. In order to understand the consumption patterns of households, because clothes are consumed within households, we split the data from the National Bureau of Statistics into two, trying to find out how Kenyans consume mitumba products and new products. And we found out that average purchase over 1 quarter, which is basically 3 months, for mitumba clothes is lower than what is spent on new clothes. So in general, Kenyans spend much more, coming down to about 50 shillings, 500 shillings rather, for new clothes, and about close to half of that on mitumba clothes. So in other words, in terms of demand, the total spending for clothes is still overwhelmingly on new clothes as opposed to mitumba. Then secondly, we did the cut by asking ourselves, in terms of residential areas. So we had a split for the same data for urban areas and rural areas. And here again, the finding is that 50% of people in urban areas spend a higher amount on timber than other people in rural areas. So what this tells you is that the consumption of clothing in general and footwear, whether from timber or from new clothes that are manufactured either here or imported into the country, depends on the income that is available to people. So clothing choice and the choice from timber also depends on the choices that people make about their styling, the kind of goods that they want, and their general availability relative to other costs. But what it shows is that Kenyans are conscious about what they want to spend their money on, and they're purchasing according to what their income levels would allow. The final point is, if you look at, so that both between urban areas and rural areas, a larger share of families or households in rural areas purchase timber than those who do in urban areas. And that is understandable as well, because it retains the main idea here, which is clothing purchases globally and in countries of Kenya's income level tend to be determined by how much money people have. So those who have more money certainly will have wider choices. And what that means is that the import of timbers, it suggests that the import of timber into Kenya widens the choices available both to people in urban areas and those in rural areas. And obviously, the final point here is we split the income purchases, both new clothes and timber clothes, rather timber goods and for new goods, comparable goods, by taking an arbitrary cutoff of 1,000 shillings. And in our finding, in a 3-month period, we found that 95%, or rather 91.5% of those who purchased in timber clothes purchased clothes of 1,000 shillings and below. And 8.5% purchased the same timber clothes of more than 1,000 shillings. In other words, showing that even with the arbitrary cutoff, those who purchase in timber overwhelmingly purchase at their 1,000 shillings and below level, which is 91%, 91.5%. Looking at new clothes, it was about 75% of those who purchased new clothes purchase clothes of 1,000 shillings and below, and then the rest, about 25%, purchase 2,000 shillings, anything above 2,000 shillings. So our study confirms to us that the purchasing of goods of this kind, basically clothing and footwear, whether from in-house, whether from domestically manufactured sources or from external sources, is predetermined to a large extent by the incomes that Kenyans earn. That's one. But also, more importantly, that when people are purchasing clothes beyond 1,000 shillings, invariably they are purchasing new clothes. But when they're purchasing below 1,000 shillings, for those who purchase, 1,000 shillings is a major cutoff, suggesting that the entire budgeting scheme for clothes in Kenya is dependent on the income that is available for people, and Mutumba provides an opportunity for those at lower income levels or those who are seeking a certain specific kinds of goods to purchase the goods that fit the budgets, that the constraints that they face.